Welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on. Jason, you are
Thanks.
the founder and CEO of Cultivise, a consultant firm that specializes in B2B lead nurturing strategies and done for you custom CRM implementation. In fact, I think you've got well over 20 years of experience in marketing and business development and have worked with some pretty big brands, the likes of Virgin Atlantic Airways and Johnny Walker. I believe you began your career as a designer and we'd established a boutique agency before starting Cultivise in 2018. I'm curious, was there a particular event or something that you observed that triggered this journey into creating Cultivise to what it is today?
Yeah. So I will tell you, being a business owner as you know, Vinay, for any business owners out there listening, doing something for so long, I never thought I was going to stop being a marketer or developing websites and running the agency. But what the catalyst for me was there was a lot of clients we were working with and even other businesses we spoke with and just knew about who were spending a lot of money on marketing, not only just Google ads and social, but going to trade shows, doing webinars and everything in between. And they weren't really able to understand if the marketing was actually driving any revenue because they weren't able to connect the dots. They didn't have either a CRM at all, or they didn't have a CRM connected to their sales and their marketing efforts. And that light bulb went off in and that's why I started Cultivise to not only help bridge that gap, but the other part of it is I knew that this is a
Mm.
complicated thing to do, right? To solve this problem. And so what I set out Cultivise's mission was not only are we going to find the right solution, but we're going to actually do the work for the client. We're actually going to integrate everything, train them on how to use the tech stacks we've created, help their marketing team, their sales team, and almost
Mm.
be like a mentor and a coach on an ongoing basis so that we have that long-term relationship with them. And we're not just a vendor
Excellent.
selling a piece of software.
And your experience certainly resonates with some of the research that I found just as a bit of prep for this episode. I came across stats like while 85% of B2B organizations have implemented CRM systems, only 27% of sales teams actively use them. A couple of stats, 75% of companies report their sales cycles have lengthened in the past 12 months, with enterprise deals taking an average of 40% or longer to close. Yet only 7% of B2B companies have achieved marketing and sales alignment, despite it being proven to increase revenue by 32%. And another stat they say is that 94% of B2B companies struggle with data quality issues in their CRM systems, impacting their ability to nurture leads effectively. Quite a big problem. I wouldn't have thought it was such an issue, at least in this day and age, given the common knowledge that people have about CRM. So, why would you say it's still such an issue today?
Do we have a few hours? No, I know we don't. But the reason it's an issue, there's a couple of factors. So one is the people that are in the trenches, responsible for sales, responsible for marketing, are often not the people making decisions about what tools they are going to be able to use for their business, how things are going to flow, how the process is going to work. And so what we find is that, and I was actually just got off a call with a client right before this, and they are in the insurance space, helping health insurance for corporations. And so they use the CRM that we provided, and now they want to integrate it into their enablement tool, where once they onboard a new customer,
Mhm.
they have to use this other software, right? And so they mapped everything. And I said, okay, this is all the contact information, but what about the company information, the account record? Like you guys are selling into accounts, right? Now you're only mapping the contacts. What about all the information about the company? And they're like, oh, isn't that part of it? And I was like, no,
Mhm.
it's actually two separate records in the CRM. And they were ready to say, okay, like when can we start programming? And I put the brakes on that to say, it doesn't seem clear that the company is really using the information or the system the way
Mhm.
that it's designed to be used. So I think the reason is that there's not an oversight from management above to say this is the process to
Mhm.
follow and creating a roadmap. They also don't sometimes provide the training. So they say, here's the playbook, go read it. Here's a PDF, here's a video, go watch a training, or here's articles.
Mhm.
That training typically
Yeah.
doesn't work. You and I both know, Vinay, people don't watch those videos. They don't look at the training guides, right? They're going to more try to figure it out as they go. And so with the training that does work, which we do here at Cultivise, is either in person or video based Zoom training where we're saying, we're going to show you how to use the system we built for you. We're not going to just flood you with generic content that may or may not apply to how your system's been set up. And then the other piece of it is accountability. If you don't have anybody in the organization that's making sure that Vinay, Jason, Mary, and Sue are all doing the things they're supposed to be doing, and if you're not looking at that on a weekly, monthly basis at a minimum, then things are probably not going to be done the way that you expect them to be done. And so that's why this fails, because there's just not the processes in place to make sure that the adoption is going to run the way that it's expected to run. And a lot of assumptions are often made that
there's a lot to unpack there, and I'd love to jump into that in a moment. I'm also curious, given your journey to date, what would you say is your personal area of strength?
Ooh, that's a good one. I like to think that it's trying to look at things from a subjective level and not just what's at face value, meaning how are other things connected to the conversation we're having and the problem we're trying to solve that could make an impact, whether it be a positive or a negative impact. So I think that's what I'm often to think that I'm always thinking outside, not even outside the box. It's cliche to say that, but just trying to understand, okay, this is the goal today we're trying to solve, or what else is going to impact this?
I wonder if you could elaborate on that by asking you this question. In that area of strength, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
About me or just in general? About my personal area of strength? Sorry, I was showing. Okay. I think it's that what they don't know is that maybe that's a really good question. I would say that it's that it's siloed, right? They're thinking, okay, Jason and his team are our CRM partner, but they're not thinking about other things we might have influence on. So for example, I have clients that do a lot of trade shows, and you and I both know that sometimes you go to trade shows, you come back with a lot of business cards, it turns into nothing. It's just paper dust. And so I have a lot of experience with how to market to trade shows. Now, it's not something I sell as a service, but it's my marketing experience. It's done helping other clients with trade show marketing and how to make those conversions. So I think that would be the answer to your question, is that they don't bring things up in conversation because they think that it's something that I can't necessarily help them with or advise.
Okay. Given this issue with CRM's adoption and implementation, would you also say that perhaps, at least in the B2B space, there is a misconception, at least with senior executives, about viewing marketing as a cost center as opposed to a revenue driver, which also impacts CRM utilization?
So the reason they think that is because they're not connecting the marketing efforts to revenue. And so what I mean by that is the fundamental thing every business should do when you get a lead, whether it be a phone call from a website lead, wherever it's coming from, that should be tagged in some way in your CRM to say it came from here. It came from Google ads or a specific Google ad. It came from this social campaign, came from this specific trade show, this webinar, et cetera.
Yep.
If you do that, and if your CRM is capable to then say, okay, now Jason has an opportunity with us, right? A sales opportunity. And whatever happens with the opportunity happens, whether you win the business or lose it, you know where Jason came from. And then if you're able to track that revenue, if it was one, you can say, okay, these are how many leads we got from the trade show. This is how much revenue we generated. It's not difficult to connect the dots. It's that most businesses don't have either a system that's capable of doing it, or they don't know how to do it. So that's pretty much the answer, is that
would you say that the companies in that position may not have also mapped out the customer journey?
I think it's more that they could possibly, it's possibly an issue, but I think it's also a set of behavior. For example, a lot of businesses we talk to, they don't even ask people when they get leads, how'd you hear about us? That question never gets asked. And it's the most fundamental question you should ask right away. Thank you for reaching out to Cultivise today. May I ask, how'd you hear about us? And then it's not just a text field, it's a drop down in your system of all the ways people find out about you. And it should be a required field so that when someone's talking to Vinay, who's a new lead, they have to select that field.
Right.
How did he hear about us? So that's, I think, the biggest flaw is that salespeople, and whether it be the front office of a company, if it's not the salesperson, it's like an appointment setter, they got to be trained to ask that question and to record that information in a systematic
Would
way.
you say that their inability to connect the dots, so to speak, in terms of actually tracking leads and how it flows within the organization is perhaps the first red flag you look for when trying to diagnose a company's marketing investment, which doesn't translate into predictable revenue, or is there something else? Okay.
There's a few. So that's one of them, right? So if I know a company spending 10 grand, 30, $40,000 a month on marketing, and if I ask them the question, once I know that, how do you know which marketing is actually bringing in revenue? Most companies can't answer that question, right? So that's a red flag. Another red flag is that they are often, and these are companies that typically have at least a few salespeople, let's say 2 to 50 salespeople. If they're doing a lot of quotes or proposals, almost always there's very little to any follow-up process.
Yep.
So quotes go out, especially if you have a high volume quote business like manufacturing companies and others, where they're sending out hundreds of quotes a month. Very few of these companies are any type of follow-up. We're working with a roofing company the last 6 months. They do about $5 million a year in business. And right now we have $1.75 million worth of potential revenue in what we call the back burner pipeline. So these are people that were sent a proposal. It's been a few weeks. They haven't said no, but they haven't said yes either. And so now we have a nurturing campaign that's going to ping them over a certain set of interval cadence and also create reminders for the salesperson to follow up. But now they have all this potential additional revenue that they otherwise would have forgotten about because they had no way of tracking that. So that's another.
So I know that's a bit of an issue in that, at least with small organizations, they can get so caught up in the chase for revenue, at least immediate revenue in the short term, that quite often some of these leads get dropped. And it's quite a lucrative area to look into. I certainly can speak from experience in that regard. I'm curious, with your CRM implementations, sorry, does it differ when a company has, say, a sales cycle of, say, 6 months versus 18 months?
Yeah. So what I'll say is that the typical commonality, if you will, is that it's a large ticket item. So it's not necessarily that the sales cycle is short or long. For example, the roofing company, they on average, they close a deal in 4 weeks, right? Somebody needs a new roof. You're paying anywhere from $15,000 to maybe $60,000 for a new roof. On average, out of all the quotes they wrote from the time we started working with them over the summer to now, which is December, the podcast will be launched later today, obviously, but just give it a time frame. We know the data is showing us that they're closing on average in 4 weeks. That doesn't mean that there's not a portion of those opportunities that are not going to close in 4 weeks. They're going to take 10 weeks, 11 weeks or longer to close. And this ideally would work for a company that I would say has a product they're selling that's typically more than $5,000 or $10,000. Anything under that, you probably don't have a very short sales cycle. Probably won't take a lot of decision-making power to make a purchase of a few $1,000s. But certainly anything over $10,000, sometimes certainly going to start having more layers of process. That's what I would typically look for is what is the minimum investment somebody has to make to do business with you? And then we can figure out how long it takes to actually close.
I'm just trying to create clarity, at least in my mind, and I'm sure for some of the listeners. Would you say that the overall objective of being able to track things through the CRM, and I'm going to assume that you also subscribe to the notion that the CRM should be a single source of truth for marketing and sales activity. If that is the case, then should revenue be the key metric that we're looking at, or other metrics that you would recommend CEOs look at other than just showing it?
So, it's good. I appreciate that. So you brought up a good thing about the center of truth. The CRM is not always the center of truth. If you have an ERP system, or let's say using Salesforce or NetSuite or some other system that's running your business, that might be the center of truth. And the CRM has to report back to that system to validate, the information, because to your point, there has to be one center of truth. You can't have multiple systems with multiple databases because you would never have clean data no matter how hard you tried if you didn't have one place that was the end all be all of your data. And sometimes it's an external
Mhm.
database, but so that's a side note. As far as the metric go, yeah, revenue, certainly every company wants to grow and you want to look at your revenue. But for companies that have a longer sales cycle, it may not be revenue. It might be how many demos did we book? How many calls did we schedule? How many appointments did we go on? It might be how many people attended our webinar, right? So there could be other metrics that are used. But yes, at the end of the day, for most businesses,
Mhm.
it does tie to revenue because every business wants to know that all the efforts they're putting in from both marketing and sales is equaling a rise in revenue.
If I could put what you said in a different way, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, would I be right in saying
Sure.
that you're almost looking at the activities that further a relationship as opposed to the potential for closing or the potential dollar value that could be received at the end of a closed deal?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It is about relationships. Some businesses are more transactional than others about building personal relationships. I would say the fundamental thing that we find that's most effective beyond revenue for our clients, because the tools we bring in help automate a lot of the
Mhm.
repetitive tasks and mundane tasks that the team is doing, whether it be sales or be customer service. Instead of having to hire two more people at $100,000 a year, you could bring in technology for $20,000 a year and save a lot of money. And now you have the system replacing that additional employee, and it's going to do a lot better of a job. Not to say that humans can't do good jobs, but if you're, for example, the quote follow up, you have thousands of quotes going out. Yeah, you could hire somebody to follow up, but are they going to be systematically following up in a
Yeah.
methodical way with all those people the exact same way? They're tired one day, they're going to work a little bit less if they're come in late or if they're on vacation. If you have a system doing it,
Mhm.
the system doesn't sleep. It's just going to
Yeah.
constantly do what it's supposed to do. So I would say that would be like the other big, huge game changer is
Mhm.
increasing productivity and efficiency with the right technology is for sure a game changer for
Certainly.
most of the
With multiple product lines and different sales cycles, how would you go about
Mhm.
structuring the marketing and sales handoff to maintain momentum?
Yeah. So every business has different ways they would qualify a lead for the term, and I know it, but for the listener, so an MQL, a marketing qualified lead, is typically somebody that has come into the organization either through the website or it could be a phone call,
Mhm.
but nobody's spoken to that person yet. So they're really not a sales qualified lead yet because you don't know if they have the
Mhm.
capacity to hire you, they have the budget, or the problem they have is something you can solve. So there has to be an intervention. Typically, that has to be done over the phone or on a call. Sometimes more sophisticated businesses will have forms
Mhm.
in their website to qualify people. What's your current budget? What's your problem, et cetera. And that form allows them to do a sort of pre qualification. Think of like
Mhm.
the loan business for mortgages, right? In order to get a mortgage, how much money do you make? What's your salary? What's all these other things, these financial things that are going to impact your ability to get a loan? So they're able to qualify you before you even speak to somebody because you're entering in all the
Mhm.
parameters that they're checking for, right? So the handoff typically could happen or most should happen in an automated fashion, right? Something triggers that to go over to sales. But I think the other piece of this too is it going to the right person. So often, and how many times, Vinay, have you heard this where web lead comes in, just goes to an inbox, right? And then the sales team is fighting over who should get it, or someone, I think David has it, but Mary really has it. And so I don't pick it up and nobody has it. And so
Mhm.
there's no routing system to put that lead in the right person's hands. And therefore, the response time to get back to that lead
Mhm.
completely just plummets. You should get back to somebody in 15 minutes once they contact your company. Every time that 15-minute window goes by, there's more potential that they're going to just go to a
Mhm.
competitor
It
and
makes a lot of sense. I'm also
yeah.
curious, have you encountered situations where a lead nurturing problem is actually a product market fit issue in disguise? Sure.
More
Have you
time. I just want
encountered
to make sure I
situations
understand the
where a
question.
lead
Yeah.
nurturing problem is actually a product market fit issue in disguise? And it
Yeah. So we have. So it's when they think that the issue is that it's not with the sales team,
Hmm.
but it really is. Right. So if you don't have salespeople that are capable of closing and are having a conversation and they are providing the value add that they should be doing, helping solve the problem versus just talking about
Yeah,
features
yeah.
and benefits of whatever they're selling, then yeah,
Mhm.
then you could have that happen, right? Because you think that okay, the sales team is there, they're good, they're a sales team. It's the content and all these other things that aren't working. But unless you're listening and really understanding how the sales team is selling, that could be yeah, like
So,
you say, an issue in disguise.
what would be your framework for determining if that is an issue and bringing it to light in order to be able to diagnose it effectively?
So the thing that I love to do, Vinay, is when I'm talking to a company and they tell me, "Oh yeah, we got a process. This is what we do, and this is how it works." I'm like, "Oh, that's great. It sounds awesome.
Mm.
Can you show it to me?" And so I'll get on a Zoom call with them and I'll say, "Please invite the top salespeople to the call. I want to see how they're using the system. I want to see how they do the actual process you described to me." And most times it is completely a mismatch. They are not doing all the things that senior leadership thinks they're doing, right? Or there's inconsistencies in what they're doing.
Hmm.
That's an eye opener, not only for me, because now
Yeah.
I get to see really what the problem is, but it's for the company itself
Hmm.
being like, oh my gosh, I didn't know this was a problem. I thought they were doing this. They told me they were doing it and they're really not doing it. That's something that even listeners today, I think, should definitely be doing. If you're in a management role or you're the owner of a company and you're assuming your team is doing XYZ, just sit over their shoulder and say, "Can you just show me everything you're doing? Like, we're working to refine our processes. I'd love to just sit and understand what
Mm.
you do and how you do it." Because that's what would certainly identify gaps and areas for
Would
improvement.
you also say that there needs to be playbooks that kind of codify these processes so that it's common knowledge across the board, at least within the team?
Yes, but I would say that the playbooks have to be digestible. If you write this whole 100
Sure.
page manual, nobody's probably ever going to look at it. So you have to write the playbook in a very simple way that the team could leverage and utilize to make them more efficient rather
Mhm.
than causing more.
With companies that are able to successfully maintain pipeline growth, even in times of economic downturn, we've talked about processes and systems. So, other than that, have you noticed elements to patterns that have enabled these companies to be successful?
Yes, I think it for sure comes with leadership. So if you have strong leadership who's really invested in making their team under them successful and they're willing to be available and accessible, that's where things dramatically change if for the good. When leadership's not involved and they're looking the other way, that's when you have the teams
Mm.
getting back into bad habits and things are
So,
just
when
going
you
to go
say
sideways.
leadership, I can understand them having a strong presence and clearly established vision and management principles. Are you also speaking to culture?
But yeah, that's all part of it, I think. I think it's more culture. You could have a laxed company where
Hmm.
everybody shows up in shorts and flip flops every day. Doesn't mean they're not productive and they're not a good organization. So I don't think culture really affects anything other than to know that we're going to keep everybody responsible and accountable. And this is what we expect of you as an employee of the company. And so if nobody's has checks and balances to make sure that
Hmm.
they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, then it's very easy to get lackadaisical and not do as much as you're supposed to be doing
Mm.
or doing the right
Certainly.
thing the right way.
Lead scoring. How would you restructure lead scoring when dealing with buying committees rather than individual decision makers?
I think with the buying communities, it's different. So you're talking about what, like
Yeah, I
trust
would say that's
sort of like profile.
more often than not the norm in B2B buying situations.
Yeah. So lead scoring traditionally in platforms is typically based on the individual. It's often difficult to base it off of events from the
Hmm.
company that you're trying to sell into. But the thing I can say about lead scoring it's like this mystical thing, right? It's so many systems have it, but yet nobody really knows how to set it up, how to really leverage it and how to
Hmm.
use it correctly often. And what we do is we have basically a principle to say, what are the actions that someone would take that would be a prospective customer? And those actions could be going to specific web pages, it could be watching a video, downloading content, it could be booking a demo, whatever those actions are, you have to start ranking those actions in sort of order
Hmm.
of importance to less important. And so the way that we found it to work the best is we give everybody a point system. So an action that is a strong action, it's okay, that's a buying intent action. They're going to get
Hmm.
80 points for doing that one thing, right? And let's say they do three things that are really important, then
Yeah.
that was 80 times three, right? Or two things, 160. But then under that, you have things that are moderately signals, right? So it's okay, they signed up for our newsletter. Okay,
Hmm.
not a huge intent, but they did something. They could get 40 points for doing that. And then the last bucket is the things that are like the less influential, like they went to our blog section on our website. Okay, we'll give them 5 points for doing that. And the other thing is, and then once you have all these, right, in a spreadsheet, you can then create a formula to say, okay, if somebody did everything, this would be their highest lead score someone could possibly get. And then we just have a mathematical formula we use to figure out what we consider like a
Hmm.
hot lead versus a warm lead. And then we leverage that to put people out to different drip campaigns or notify salespeople. But the other thing about lead scoring, I think is worth mentioning, Vinay, a lot of people on their websites have career sections of their site. Here's our job opportunities or upload a resume. You want to make sure you're giving negative points for anybody going to those pages and
Yeah.
those sections or filling out those forms. Because often I've seen companies where they forget to do that. And now they think a hot lead came
Hmm.
in, but it's really somebody applying for a job.
Just so that I have clarity, would you say that lead scoring should be done on an individual basis, but for a B2B situations where you're buying committees, you're looking at aggregating a lot of these scores in order to determine how likely an account is to potentially buy from you sooner rather than later on the one hand. Also with individual scores, it's helpful to look at them in order to identify potential champions within an organization.
Exactly.
Okay,
You said it
terrific.
perfect. I could do that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at various data points within a CRM system. From your experience, what data points do you find that most companies overlook or gloss over that could actually predict buying intent?
The buying intent piece, I'll pause on that for a minute, but I think that the thing that people often overlook is when they're setting up a system, they have a lot of text fields, a lot of text input fields in their database. And that's a big no-no. And the reason it's a big no-no is because you can't segment data if every entry
Sure.
is
Yeah.
non-specific, right? Or if a letter is off or there's an abbreviation. So when we set up these systems for our clients, we try to think about how can that be a drop-down menu or a checkbox of different choices of different services so that we can have
Hmm.
rich data that's segmentable, right? If we want to do anything from like a retargeting standpoint or just the messaging, we want to be different. And so when you have data that's not clean like that, it's very difficult to really make heads and tails out of that information because it's almost in a way useless when there's that inconsistent way data is flowing into a company. And I see that even typically even on companies' websites, be like, how
Hmm.
can we help you? And it's a text field. That's a
Yeah.
huge no-no. It should be a drop down. Here's all the services you provide. They're going to pick what service they're interested in. Another one too, just for the listeners, is like a something to think about. We often do for clients is how would you describe
Hmm.
yourself on even a contact us form? And it's I'm the owner of the company, I'm the sales manager, I'm in service,
Hmm.
whatever it is specific to your business. That's going to segment all the data coming in. They're going to self-identify who they are before you even talk to them. And so these are the types of things that we encourage and we help our clients do.
If I understand this correctly, you could potentially be coming in to work with some of your clients who have years of messy CRM data. So I'm curious, how do you help them clean that up without disrupting ongoing sales processes?
It's usually a big project. But in all joking aside, we try to do it from the most current data to the oldest data. So let's say it's the middle of the year, whatever it is, we'll tell the client, okay, let's look at the data from Jan 1
Mhm.
to August 31st. And let's clean up that first. Once that cleaned up, then we'll go back to the year before. And so if we start rolling back and cleaning up data, because sometimes if a company's been in business for 10, 20 years, the data from
Yeah.
10, 20 years ago may not even be relevant because many times people change jobs and things like that. And most of these companies that are older too don't have email
Okay.
addresses for every contact record. And so even if they got
Mhm.
10,000 quotes in their system, they may not have email addresses because all their quotes were done printing something out and faxing it, right? Or whatever. So if there's no email address, most systems require an email address to upload a contact record. That's the unique
Mhm.
identifier in most platforms, or in a lot of them, I should say. And what's good is a contact if you don't have the email, right? So some things we'll do just easy is okay, you have a list of 80,000 people, 20,000 people. Let's look at that in a spreadsheet and
Mhm.
see how many are missing an email.
Mhm.
Boom, those people are gone. We just can't, unless you could figure out where their
Right.
email is, we don't even touch those people. And then we look at other fields like
Mhm.
what information do you have? You don't have a last name, you only have first name? Okay,
Mhm.
we're not using that data. Maybe we are, maybe we'll clean it up, but that's how we start doing it. We start looking to see what are the most complete records and we focus on those first. And then the ones that have the weakest chain
Mhm.
of elements to a full record, those are the ones that typically go.
I would imagine that as you're
Yeah.
cleaning up all the data, there's a process of perhaps checking it against databases in order to try and clean it up to an extent. Yep.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you could use things like ZoomInfo, Apollo, and other platforms. Another big piece that we
Yeah.
do is the email hygiene piece. So before we import any data, we're always going to run it through to check the validity of every email address and make sure the email address is still valid and good. Because the last thing anybody would want to do is import thousands of contacts into a new system, send out their first email, and get
Yeah.
a 20% bounce rate. So that's going to most definitely have a negative effect on your domain reputation. And so you want to make sure that the data you're putting into a system is clean and the email addresses are
Yeah.
still.
Feedback loops. I'd imagine that's a key part of the process in order to understand both marketing and sales outcomes as well as campaigns. What's your approach to creating those data feedback loops?
We do it more of a hands-on approach. So every month we have meetings with our
Mhm.
clients, typically the sales and the marketing team, and we're looking to see what has transpired
Mhm.
in the last 30 days since we last spoke. And that allows us to identify the good and the bad, right? What's and where we can provide areas to help things.
Let's take a scenario where you're implementing a new CRM process. How would you prevent sales teams from reverting back to their old habits?
Good question. So I love your questions, Vinay. You got great questions today. Keep me on my toes. I love it. So when we're bringing a new organization on, depending on the size of the sales team, if it's a team of, let's say, more than
Mhm.
10 people or even 7 people, we'll typically find who's most likely to be the quickest adopter to the new platform. And so we'll start training maybe 1 to 3
Okay.
salespeople and get them going for a month or two, get them work out any kinks, get their feedback, and then we'll roll it out to the rest of the
Mm.
sales team. But the reason we have these monthly calls is to make sure that nobody goes back to their old ways. And I'll give you an example, great example. We had a client based out of Canada. They do manufacturing of different like basically scales to measure really heavy things. So think of the 5-ton trucks driving around or farm
Mhm.
equipment or the tractor trailers. Their equipment weighs all of those types of applications. And so they had been using a CRM for a while. They brought us in to do some consulting and they said, okay, we're good. We don't need anything. We're on track. And for a year or so, we didn't work with them. And then they came back and they're like, we actually need some more help. And so I started working with their head salesperson, and I'm looking for a report that could be replacing of what I'm doing is a spreadsheet. I'm like, why are you using a spreadsheet? And I'm like, you can do all that in the CRM. And he showed me the spreadsheet. And the day I was like, my hands went up. I was like, Clint, I'm like, what are you doing? I'm like, you're creating so much more work for yourself because everything you're doing here, you're copying and pasting and things out of the CRM into your spreadsheet. Like, you don't need to do that. And so we spent probably about, I don't know,
Mm.
maybe 3 hours going through understanding what he needed, why he was doing it, why he thought what he was doing was easier. And after all that training and modifying things in the CRM, he's, oh my God, this
Mhm.
is actually much easier than what I was doing. And so it's, he went back in the old habit
Yeah.
because he was comfortable with the spreadsheet, because he didn't know how to do it in the CRM. So rather than asking, he was like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm just going to go back to what I know. And that's where I think
Certainly.
people fall
Yep.
into that trap.
Um, in terms of fixing processes, especially before implementing new technology, well, I think you spoke about understanding the company's objectives and working backwards from that. Is there anything else to your framework that you would use to determine if a company needs to fix their processes before implementing new technology?
Yeah. So we have something that we offer called the
Mhm.
CRM fit assessment. That's a process we go through. There's about 30 to 40 questions we'll go and take that client and a company through to understand what are the business challenges they have, where are the gaps, what technology are they using
Mhm.
today, how are they using that technology, what does their company look like a year from now, 2 years, 5 years from now, how do they see themselves growing, and all these other things. Because the reality is CRMs, there are cheap ones and there's really expensive ones. And even the cheap ones
Mm.
may not be cheap. So you might sign up for a free version of HubSpot and be like, oh, this is great. But the free version of HubSpot, while it's a great platform, the free version doesn't really give you HubSpot. It gives you like a glorified address book and some really like simple tools. But for the sales tools and the marketing
Yep.
tools, that's probably about $2,000 a month. And if you're thinking, okay, like I have the free version, but now you can't afford it, why start that way? So my point is that we help them understand what they need, where they want to be at. And that's really sets them up for success to make sure that they're investing in not only the right technology, but also the things that are going to make the most impact for the best value in their.
So if you were to look at the first 90 days of CRM implementation to ensure adoption and revenue impact, how would you structure those first 90 days?
So for us, it takes typically about 3 to 6 weeks
Mhm.
to fully set up a CRM for a client. And during that, at the end of that, that also includes the training. So we'll do anywhere, typically about 4 to 6 hours of live training with a client, with their sales team and the different other members, marketing, et cetera. And so after that, the reality is, to answer your question, it depends upon how active they are. Some of our
Mhm.
clients, they jump right in and they're putting data in there from day one. And so within a few months, we can see dramatic results. Others, maybe because of the nature of their business or because they're seasonal, and they're like, okay, we're going to onboard the CRM in our downtime when things are quiet so that when things are busy, we're ready to go. So you may not see
Mhm.
activity for a few months until things ramp up again. But I can almost guarantee to say that if everybody's doing everything they should be doing and following the path that we've created, the playbook we created, and they're putting in their effort, that for sure within 6 months, they're going to see effort results on that effort. And that's going to be results from which marketing
Mhm.
is working, which isn't working. What do we have in the pipeline in terms of revenue? I was just give you a quick example. I was talking to this roofing client we have just on Monday, and we have a series of emails that are
Mhm.
sent to follow up on quotes that they do. And we have a reporting capability to show them how the emails influence sales. And would you believe it? And the client was shocked to see this, that the first email that goes out says, hey, Bidet, we just want to make sure you got the quote. If you have any questions, let us know. Pretty short and sweet.
Mhm.
There's a little more to it than that, but that's the summary. That email generated $180,000 worth of revenue. Just following up. The system was just following up. It wasn't a salesperson, it wasn't anybody. It came from the salesperson. So those are the simple things we can do to show that value,
Mhm.
typically in a pretty short
Certainly.
window.
That's interesting. So you're essentially also working to attribute revenue correctly when there are multiple marketing touches over perhaps an extended period of time.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
What would be your method for calculating the true ROI of that?
True ROI, you
Mhm.
got to figure out where your cogs are, right? The cost of goods, right? So that's something that most
Yep.
CRMs unfortunately
Mhm.
can't incorporate into the way that they track things. So really what we're looking at is gross revenue that's coming in. And then it's ultimately up to the client to say, okay, I did that roof cost me, I charged the client $40,000, but we had $20,000 in materials. So we made $20,000 profit on it. We're using the data really for the high level, the high gross revenue number. And then they're ultimately responsible for figuring out what the cost of goods are
Hmm.
so they know
Certainly.
what their profit is.
That's
Plus,
right.
there's
Yeah.
also marketing expenses, right? So if you're spending money on marketing and you're spending $10,000 a month on AdWords and you got 100 leads, do the math, you
Mm.
know what your cost is per lead, but then you also have to figure out how many of those leads didn't convert. Yeah. So all the data is there. It's just about putting it all together.
Are there perhaps leading indicators that you recommend companies to look at, as opposed to some of the lagging indicators that which would be the things that we just mentioned? I would imagine that leading indicators would give companies a bit of an edge in terms of course correction or pivoting in their marketing and sales endeavors.
One thing for sure is so
Mhm.
in some of the systems we use, we have what we call a
Okay.
campaign insights report. And what that does is if you think of it as a visual spreadsheet, even though it's not a spreadsheet, but that's the framework I'll use for the people today, since if there was an audio and there's no visual. A
Mhm.
is your marketing channel, your AdWords, your Facebook, whatever you're doing, your direct mail. Column B, second column is how many leads did you
Mhm.
generate from that? And then column C is how many of those actually wanted a quote from you or to do business with you. And out of those, how
Mhm.
many said yes and how many said no? And then we can like tally all that data together in this one visual dashboard that the system has to say, okay, we got a lot of leads,
Mhm.
but they weren't good. So a really classic example, and I'm not knocking Facebook, but maybe perhaps it's going to come across that way. Most B2B businesses I see that use Facebook, they get a high
Yeah.
volume of leads, but
Mhm.
they're really poor quality leads. It's the wrong phone number. No one ever answers the phone when you call them or you send them an email. And so, if you were able to see that, would be an indicator. Maybe we shouldn't spend so much money on Facebook anymore
Mhm.
because it's generating a lot of leads,
Mhm.
yes, but it's not bringing us quality. And
Mhm.
that's what every business wants, right? And that's something for those listening today, Vinay, that have a marketing agency. It's not that the marketing
Yeah.
agency is doing anything bad, right? All they're able to tell you is what's being generated in terms of how many leads. So you may be getting a lot of leads from whatever they're doing for you,
Mhm.
but that's only half the story. In my opinion, it's only like 25% of the story, quite honestly, because you don't know if the leads are good or not. And so if you don't have a way to track those leads, how are you ever going to give information back to your marketing agency to say, hey, marketing agency, this is working or this isn't working. We need to fix this. Because most companies will just eventually fire the agency
Yeah.
because they'll just say, "Oh, it didn't work. Like what you were doing didn't work." But often it's not the fault of the agency; it's the fault of the business not being able to.
Yeah, in that vein of thought, do you subscribe to the notion that companies should use benchmarks to evaluate their marketing and sales alignment compared to industry standards?
I don't know. Most of our
Okay.
clients don't really do that, quite honestly, because
Hmm.
every business is so unique. They might have their own internal benchmarks that they're trying to hit. Like I know we have our own internal ones at Cultivise. It's okay. Like last year, our average monthly gross
Hmm.
revenue was this. We're trying to increase by 10%. So this is our benchmark of what we're trying to get to every month in terms of sales or meetings, whatever. So you can have, I think, benchmarks, but I think to compare them to industry averages is challenging just because
Hmm.
there's so many nuances, right, that are
Hmm.
in
Certainly.
between all of that.
I should have perhaps clarified this earlier, but in the CRM solutions that you advocate that companies use for their purposes, are you CRM agnostic? Because if I'm not mistaken, I saw an affiliation with Sharp Spring in regards to training.
Yeah, a great question. So there are a few that we
Mhm.
like that we've used a lot over the years. So one of them, since you mentioned it, Sharp Spring, which many people have never heard of, had been a company around for about 20 years, a publicly traded company on NASDAQ. They sold that business 3 years ago to Constant Contact. So now it's called Constant Contact Lead Gen CRM. So we do still work with that platform a lot. We do a lot of work with HubSpot. And then we also use some companies don't need the CRM piece, but they need the marketing automation or the social automation piece. So we use another product called VBout, which is a really amazing product for that. but we have experience working with like Salesforce and NetSuite where we can integrate our tools
Okay.
into those other systems.
So, and
Yeah.
with the Sharp Spring or Constant Contact, do they provide a certain level of training that other companies don't? What was the reason for the affiliation with them?
So they don't
Okay.
provide, we provide all the training. Cultivise does all the training. Even for HubSpot, we do all the training. So the reason we like those products is because the user interface is quite
Hmm.
eloquently developed and it's easy to adopt for new clients coming on board, especially those that don't have a lot of CRM experience. It's telling somebody, what would you rather try,
Hmm.
Vinay? If you've never ridden a bicycle, would you rather me give you like a BMX or a 10 speed or one of those old fashioned bikes where the front wheel
Yeah.
is like 2 feet high and the back wheel is like, that's a lot more intimidating, right? So we
Hmm.
try to make it easy and find platforms that are simple for people to get comfortable with. And that's why we
Hmm.
chose those. And also for the value, right? Platforms like Marketo and Eloqua, you can be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on software. And unless you're a $200 million, $500 million big company, you're not going to
Hmm.
need that level of sophistication. The software that we like, that we talked about today, it's more than sophisticated for those size businesses that we work with, which, by the way, most of the companies we work with, I would say on average are in the three to like $200
Hmm.
million range, just so your audience knows. That's kind of like the size. And typically they have a sales team of
Hmm.
two to like,
I'd love to just touch upon strategy, if you will, because I'm curious as to your approach to scaling revenue operations without proportionally scaling headcount.
it's all about what I talked about before about
Hmm.
those repetitive tasks, right? So if we got to use technology and there's a new product that we're actually just starting to test out. AI
Yeah.
is obviously the big thing this year and for a while now, and it's going to be even more going into the future. But this tool takes a list of prospects with their cell phone numbers and auto dials, but then uses
Yeah.
AI to basically talk to the person. And I really
Hmm.
didn't think it was going to be good at all, Vinay. I saw a demo of this and I was really blown away on how the people had no
Hmm.
idea that they were talking to AI. Even if they had questions, the AI was able to respond. It talked in a very natural way, like you and I would be talking today. And
Yeah.
the whole purpose of it is just to book a meeting. That's all it's designed to do. It's not designed to solve their world end problems. It's just, okay, you have an issue, you'd like to learn
Hmm.
more. Great. Let's get some time on the calendar. And then a real person. And it was funny because when they were showing me some of the actual calls when the live
Hmm.
person spoke to, the prospect was like, that sounds amazing, but how can you use it on me? We actually did. That's how this call.
Yeah.
And we're like shocked. And they would even, I don't want to say fell for it, but that it seemingly
Hmm.
was a real person calling them. And so I think that's to answer your question. I think you're going to see more and more tools like that being leveraged because let's face it, SDRs for some clients and companies are really important. But when you're selling and you're doing cold calling specifically, if you're not in a good mood, if you're tired, or if you've
Hmm.
already done 50 calls, 100 calls, your demeanor is going to change. Your energy is going to change. Or if they're rude with you or they say something snarky on the phone, as a human, you're going to change and react to that emotion. When the AI is
Hmm.
doing it,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It doesn't matter what happens. So you're always going to be upbeat. You're always going to be on point. And so I think there's a huge potential for this type of technology
Yeah.
coming into
Would you
five.
say that the roles of SDRs would be diminished as a result of these technologies?
Absolutely. I think so. Yeah. Because the role I think an
Mhm.
SDR is really trying to just set an appointment. That's all they're really trying to do in most businesses. So if you have a better mousetrap that
Hmm.
can set more efficiently appointments, why wouldn't you use that? And why wouldn't you invest your money in hiring better
Yeah.
salespeople that actually close the deal?
I'm just curious about a couple of things.
Yeah.
What skills would you say CEOs should prioritize when hiring marketers who can drive revenue rather than just create content, MQLs?
Well, I will tell
Mhm.
you, I will answer the question this way. So the marketing team that we use, okay, we've been working with them for about 2 years now. It's an external team. And they did something that I absolutely loved. And this was the reason I hired them because there are thousands and
Certainly.
thousands of marketing companies out there. We both know that. Right. And so does everybody listening. What I was impressed upon was I told them, listen, I like what you're saying. I like the approach. We just don't have the need right now, but maybe in the future. Within a couple of weeks, They sent me the most comprehensive document, and it was probably maybe about 5, 6 pages long. I'm trying to remember. It's been a while, and it was them explaining how they
Mhm.
understood what Cultivise did. And this was all from a half-hour conversation, but then they did research, and the fact that they really understood not only who we were, but who we sold to, the problems we solved, and they put it together in such a compelling
Mhm.
way that they really understood us, that I held on to that document. And about 8 months
Mhm.
later, I called up Emma and I said, "Hey, Emma," I'm like, "I'm ready to hire you guys because I was so impressed by that document. I didn't even ask for it. You didn't tell me you were going to send it. You didn't
Mhm.
ask if I wanted it. You just did it. But the fact that you understood us so well
Mhm.
was really impressive." And so I think that would be my advice is, if you're going to be hiring a marketer or an agency, have a conversation with them, tell them what you do, and say, "Can you come back to me and I want you to reiterate what we do, the problems we solve, how we solve it, what makes us unique, and how you would strategically go to market with us, and what the positioning would be to help attract people that
Mhm.
we specifically can help." And because most agencies are not going to do that. Most agencies going to be like, "Yeah, we'll do your SEO, we'll do your
Yeah.
PPC," and it's all boilerplate. And I think those boilerplate ones, certainly the ones that are not, in my opinion, are going to deliver as well as the ones that take the time to really hone in on what you do, how you do it, and then making a very specific program
Mm.
to get you the
Certainly.
results you're
And a
looking for.
great point there. As technology improves, I would imagine that buying committees as they are today would also change. How would you recommend companies adapt their sales and marketing approaches to counter the changes that are coming down the pipeline?
I think it all is relative to what you're doing. And I'll use Cultivise as an example. So we have we're modifying for the last 2 years. We've been doing a lot of thought leadership content
Mhm.
while we're talking today, right? This year alone, I've recorded probably about 35 podcasts with other hosts like yourself. And with this new video feature that LinkedIn launched and coming in January, from what I understand, the new algorithm is going to be turned on. They're going to be looking at content. And if people don't know what I'm talking about, it, and on LinkedIn on the mobile app, there's a video button. If you click that, it's going to be like
Mm.
a TikTok type feed, but they're prioritizing vertical based video versus horizontal based video. And so I told the marketing team, I was like, "Listen, even though I know YouTube and TikTok even is all going to horizontal format, well, YouTube has always been horizontal. I'm like, I want to test the vertical format for some of the stuff we're
Mm.
doing to see if we have any uplift." And so that's just me knowing that this technology is like out there and how it works and what it favors. And so that's what I would say is rely on your own research or talk to someone you trust or your marketing team to understand like what changes are happening in the industry and how to leverage.
Great points there. To wrap up, Jason, are there perhaps a couple of aspects around revenue growth, especially as it comes, especially through the lens of CRM implementation, that you find doesn't get talked about very much? If so, what would they be?
I think for sure lead nurturing is one, right? So being able, it might get talked about, but I don't
Hmm.
know that it really gets fully implemented in the right way. And for your audience today, and maybe we'll get to it before we wrap up, but if your audience goes to afterthelead.com, that's afterthelead.com, on there is a playbook that I wrote to explain step by step how to set up a lead nurturing strategy, regardless of the platform you have in terms of CRM. And if they have questions as well, they can even book a call with me on that page. Okay? I'm always happy to have a conversation. For me, it's not a sales call. It's really more a discovery call and understanding what people's problems are and any advice I can provide. So for your listeners, I'm willing to jump on the call with them as well and have that strategy session. But that's what I would say for the revenue, because it's also the last part of that is data, right? Old data, old customers you have. Customers that bought one thing are
Hmm.
more than likely to buy something else from you that they may need. And so you should really be leveraging your old data, past customers, and trying to resell or upsell to them as well, because that's a lot more cost effective than trying to find brand new
Brilliant point there.
customers.
If you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
My top takeaway is that let me get a large cup of coffee because Renee and Jason spoke about a lot of things and I need to pay attention and take some notes.
So, would you say that having your CRM speak to that single source of truth and be a revenue enabler would be, I guess, a key point that most companies miss out on.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think the piece too is that it's more about, I think, the
Okay.
process, I think, is the biggest thing.
Mhm.
If anybody listening today, the thing that I would take away is a couple things. One is, let's break down in for our different areas of the business. So like from marketing to sales to onboarding to customer service, like how are those different divisions or people working within our company? What tools are they using? What are their steps when someone
Mhm.
speaks to a lead? What do they do first? What do they do second, et cetera? I think it's really important to start documenting that. The other thing I think that's a huge, essentially now that starting the new year with budgets, if you have the capacity to speak to accounting or even have access to your own bank statement, look to see what software you're paying for on a
Mm.
monthly basis or annual basis and start taking note of that and saying, am I even getting any leverage out of that? Is it doing anything for my business? We've seen plenty of companies have tens of thousands of dollars in expenditure for software they don't even use. It's just somebody signed up for it a couple of years ago and it
Mm.
just sips through every month and keeps getting paid for. So I think that would be another avenue to look at too, because you might be able to free up money to apply it to the things we're
Certainly.
talking about.
Makes a lot of sense. And if listeners are curious, want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
So as I mentioned, afterthelead.com is the best place to go. You can find me on social media. You could go to the Cultivise website, but after the lead, it has my contact info. It has all of my social media there. Like I mentioned, the playbook is there, the link to schedule a call with me. There's also an opportunity on that page to sign up for the Cultivise newsletter, which we publish each
Mhm.
month with tons of great content, all the things we're talking about today and more. So that would be the best
Certainly.
place
We'll
for your
include links to that in
listeners.
the show notes. Jason, this has been terrific. Thank you for doing this.
Thank
This
you.
still